Welcome to Straight Talk for Entrepreneurs, where we reveal what it really takes to build a successful business. Whether you are starting with an idea or growing your business, this is the show for you. My guests and I will show you how to build a strong mindset, a powerful body, a profitable business. Hi, I'm Brandon C. White, and this is Build a Business Success Secrets. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Build a Business with Brandon. I am your host. And we have Whitney here today. Thank you for taking the time. It is, what is it? New Year's Eve.
It is New Year's Eve.
Whitney is, I don't even remember where you are, but you're going to tell us where you are. Whitney's got a great story. We met through another mutual friend and a guest on the podcast, Joe Tiano. And Joe, after he did the episode, said, hey, he had 3 people he introduced me to. Whitney was one of them. All super interesting people who are doing things that I would say are making the best of life. So Whitney, thank you so much for doing it and finding a really good internet connection. I know you're in Mexico, right?
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. You know, we actually had to go yesterday and buy a new Wi-Fi setup for the house we're staying in. Not only for this podcast, but also for just work and life, because the connection we've had for the last week or so has just been not adequate, as goes the life of our digital nomadism.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that because I think I connected with you and your husband on LinkedIn and I saw it was pending. I didn't take it personally because I figured you didn't have internet. So
Absolutely.
at least it sounds really clear. If we have a problem, we'll just keep on rolling. But Whitney, can you take us through your journey? Whitney was an attorney of all things, and if you choose the career of an attorney, you're sort of really going down a very traditional, I say that in the most loving way, but you're going down a career path that's very traditional. And then all of a sudden we find you in this digital nomad style. And so can you take us through from, I'm not saying from 12 years old, but from did you always want to be an attorney and how that happened?
Sure. So I was born, no, I'm just kidding. I grew up
Where are you from though? Because that's an interest. I think the listeners would be interested in that because you've jumped a few countries.
I have. So I was born to a very traditional set of parents, which is why I took such a traditional track in life when it came to career choices. They were Canadian. I happened to be born during a stint that they were living in Anchorage, Alaska. So I actually have dual citizenship and have lived significant amounts of time in both countries. Probably a little longer in the US now than in Canada. But when I consider where am I from, I usually tell people Canada. It's where I spent most of my child rearing years. Both my parents were professionals. My mom was in early childhood development and very educated. My dad is an architect and same sort of thing. So I kind of came by the professional inspiration and motivation. Honestly, it was something that was fostered in my family, and education was always very important to both of my parents. I think like a lot of little kids who are argumentative and good at negotiating, it was kind of, drilled into me at an early age that, wow, you'd be a great lawyer, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing that we tell our youth, but it certainly, was a contributing factor to me deciding early on that would be a good track for myself. We wound up back in the States when I was in high school in Southern California, and I was very privileged to go to a law and government magnet high school, which really just bolstered my love for law and government and realizing that I was very, very good at that and something that, was fulfilling. After high school, I went to college. I went to UC Santa Barbara, which is on the beach. And after living in Canada, I thought, I'm never leaving this place. There's no snow, there's sand, there's surfer boys. And this is just, who doesn't want to live, in this type of environment? So in law school or in college at UC Santa Barbara, I interned for a few local politicians. I actually thought that politics was probably going to be more my speed, not so much the legal end of things, but most politicians go to law school, so it seemed like a pretty natural progression for me to jump there. I took a couple years off of school after college, thank goodness. Needed to dry out a little after Santa Barbara. That place is a wild, wild place. I'm not sure if it still is. I was actually talking to somebody recently who was saying it's actually pretty challenging to get in there academically now. So I probably wouldn't qualify for.
I think it's still, I think there's some people still having fun from what I
Oh,
understand,
good,
but
good.
yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
How can you not? I mean, if
Absolutely.
I mean, we have the same thing here in Half Moon Bay. You're on the edge of Silicon Valley, but people are like, "Are you serious?" Well, we're sort of serious, but
Right.
yeah, you live at the beach, right? Like, what are you gonna do?
Absolutely. I think there's something about that California vibe too, having lived in a lot of other places now. It's just, there's something about, the culture there that is kind of that laid back, fun, lifestyle that everyone really dreams of. So for me, that was prime location for 4 years, but it also took a little bit of recovery.
So when you were drying out, where did you go to dry out?
Sure. So I moved to LA. I
Oh,
actually
that's a good place to dry out.
yeah, probably the worst place I could have gone. But I worked for Fox Broadcasting Company in their legal affairs department. I had a close family friend who took me under her wing and kind of mentored me there. And after working there for a couple years, I thought, oh, well, the entertainment law industry is pretty interesting. So maybe that will be my path post law school. But I did eventually go back to law school. I moved down to Orange County, went to a small a private law school there called Chapman. Great, great, great experience. So grateful I took those 2 years to really get my head back on straight and figure out that law school was an expensive endeavor that I probably wanted to invest a little bit more time and energy into. And gosh, the people who say they hated law school, I would go back to law school in a heartbeat. I just loved it. It was challenging. It was great, but because I had already been in the working world, I treated it like a job. And for me, it was something that was just it was something I was good at, but it was also something I really enjoyed. I don't think I quite had the same educational experience in undergrad, much to my own doing. So law school was a nice treat to actually feel like I was gaining so many new skills and so much knowledge and, making incredible connections. So that was an exciting time and a really great time for me. When I came out of law school, I graduated in 2012. And when I came out, there were not a lot of jobs available except for in litigation. So I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll test the waters there, see how it goes. And it wasn't necessarily what I had thought I would do. I always thought I would go back more into entertainment law or, something maybe more politically charged. But alas, you go where the jobs are, especially when you have student loans to pay back. So I went into a litigation job, jumped around to a few different firms, and turns out I was pretty good at litigation. So I was very lucky in the firms that I was with. I had some amazing mentors there who, also gave me some great experience. I had some really great trial experience early on, which many litigators go years and years before, they ever see the inside of an actual courtroom for trials. So that was a pretty exciting time for me. But it wasn't long after, kind of getting into litigation that I thought, like, wow, this is not all I thought it was going to be chalked up to be. Winning is fun and feels good, but the amount of time that it takes to actually get to the place where you're in the game is a long time, and not something that I thought was going to be quite like this. You, much like anything, get sold a different different bill of sale than when you actually get into the job and start practicing and kind of doing the things that come with the day-to-day of that.
So
And
can we unpack that a little bit and just
yeah,
what was sold? I mean, ironically, I thought I was going to be an attorney. My grandfather was an attorney, and I thought I was going to go to law school. In many ways, it didn't work out for all the whatever the universe's reasons were, which appear to be good so far. But what is that? What was in your mind when you went in, and then what was, you had this expectation, you were basically let down, it sounds like.
sure. I grew up with a very strong female presence. My mother was so independent, so driven, so just feminist to the max. Litigation and law traditionally is still a very male dominated field. And so there was really something for me about going into specifically litigation that I had something to prove. I was going to go there. I was going to do the thing. I was going to become a partner. I was going to have a family. I was going to balance all these things. I was going to be this high powered litigator. I was going to make all the money. I was going to be great at what I did, but I was also going to have this like amazing home life. And when you actually get into something and realize, I mean, number one, how much work that actually takes, but also number two, what you have to compromise and give up in your life in order to make those things work. I guess some people are able to do it. For me, I didn't see a clear path as to how I was going to be able to balance all of those things. And quite honestly, getting there and being good at something wasn't fulfilling. And it was really this huge letdown, kind of like what you said. I'd worked all of this time, my whole life. I thought this was the thing. This is my path. This is what I'm going to do in life. I'm going to be so great on all planes. Great mom, great wife, great partner, great person. And that just didn't quite didn't quite pan out the way that I wanted it to. I think probably the first big sign for me was the huge toll that it took on my health. Your first couple years as a litigator, you're burning the midnight oil, you're working crazy hours, you're doing all the work that nobody else wants to do. To say it's not a happy place is a nice way of putting it. If you make it through those years, sure, it gets better, but there is a certain rite of passage that if you're, especially in the litigation world, if you're coming up through the ranks, that, you are kind of working your way through. And I think that just took a much bigger toll on me than I realized it would. So kind of that first indicator for me was health. I started putting on a lot of weight. I was sick all the time. I just wasn't in a positive, good place anymore. I was always really active. I taught spin class all through law school. And so I continued that when I was practicing as a lawyer. And it's really upsetting when something that your body has been able to do for a long time, when your body starts not really loving doing that activity anymore. For me, that resonated in some aches and pains that I kind of thought, gosh, I'm in my 20s. Why is that happening? I'm working out all of this time. Why am I still putting on all of this weight? Because you're not sleeping and you're eating out all the time and you're drinking and you're doing all of these things to cope with, this highly stressful environment. But secondary to that, when your health really takes a hit, your relationships really start, facing a big challenge as well, because you yourself are not in a good place. And so that started kind of becoming an issue. I started missing a lot of events for friends. And then the third kind of issue that sort of arose quickly and was a much bigger issue than I thought it would actually be the financial wherewithal of it all. You make good money in litigation, but I was essentially paying a mortgage every month in student loans, which they don't tell you about before you go to law school. And so that was a big undertaking. And so here I was working crazy hours with a good job, well educated, and I was still living paycheck to paycheck. So there's something a little disgruntling when, you think this is going to be the most awesome situation and your health takes a hit, your relationships take a hit, and then financially you're also kind of struggling. Like it wasn't. And then on top of that, it's a very stressful environment that's very combative, that's very aggressive, that you're fighting, gender roles and young roles. And gosh, if I had a nickel for every time someone asked me, are you the court reporter coming to, take this deposition or do whatever it was, I'd be a rich woman at this point in time. So, there's a lot of aspects of it that, I think kind of were pushing me to, this is probably not where I'm going to be forever. But truly the catalyst was meeting my now husband and him moving in. That was kind of the push that I needed to realize that, oh, there's something outside of this. I don't have to live this traditional life. I don't have to be this person in this role that's unhappy and, living the dream, so to speak, but not living the dream at all. And Chris, my husband, is, like I said, the catalyst behind all of this. I blame and attribute all of it to him at the same time. He's about the most optimistic and positive person I've ever met. And when you live with someone like that, it's really hard not to feel that way yourself. Or when you're feeling not that way, it becomes more evident that there's something wrong with that and something you're unwilling to settle with. So I knew there was some things that were amiss and some things that were not fulfilling, but it really wasn't until we met and really started living together that became apparent that, okay, it's time to make a move, time to make a jump. I don't know what the heck that is, but it's something different than where I'm standing right now.
So just to recap, you come up with a traditional family, hardworking family. Your mother is a hard charger. You're basically built, so to speak, to go to law school or either law school, become a doctor, or I don't know, some profession, right? Essentially. you go into it and it is nothing like you think. And I was thinking, uh, when you were talking, is what a lot of people don't realize is that in these professions, you do make a lot of money. When I was a venture capitalist, everybody's like, oh, you're making a lot of money. You're doing all this stuff. But let's unwind it a little bit and do it on a per hour basis.
Yeah,
And on a per hour basis, it starts to change the whole game. And people don't see that, right? That's not, they,
absolutely.
they don't, because that's not what is cool or doesn't boost our ego, right? By taking the curtain back and saying, yes, I make multiple six figures, but by the way, I work about 18 hours a day. I can't remember what city I'm in. Um, my health is through the roof. I have no relationship. I feel lonely. And I don't know, I keep going, right? I mean, that's,
Absolutely.
I'm in my 20s, 30s or 40s, whatever that is. I look like I'm 70,
Yeah.
right? And, um, you know, so you come from there, you do it for 5 years, right? You're doing
Yep.
this for 5 years, this grind, which is crazy. And you meet your husband. How long was it? Few questions. How long was it that you met him? Then he moved in, and then you quit your job. And what was, like, can you tell me that pivotal, I call a pivotal moment. What was that pivotal moment that you said, okay, because it takes a lot. I mean, effectively what you have, and all of us have when you're in those situations, is you have a habit.
Hmm.
Your habit is you're going to go to work, you're going to be the traditional person, you're going to make this traditional money. But to break a habit is, as we all know, is not easy. So there's these pivotal moments that have to be, the motivation factor has to be so high that it triggers that behavior. And when we talk about career changes and those sorts of things, like, there has to be a breaking point, right?
Absolutely. So I guess in order of those questions, and I was kind of chuckling as you were asking how long it was until my husband moved in, because much to my very traditional family's dismay, my husband and I met on Tinder. It was the one night stand that never ended. And he moved in pretty immediately after we met. So, imagine a situation. He's serial entrepreneur. He'd actually just moved back from Latin America where he'd been living for 10 years. He didn't really have a stable job when we met. He was sort of in and out of some consulting gigs. And actually, the reason why he wound up moving in so quickly was he was working with a company who had, as part of his payment plan, put him up in housing. And that situation wasn't working so well. So he had said, let me just stay with you for a weekend, figure out like where I'm going to go after that. And kind of get out of this toxic living environment. And I thought, yeah, sure, no problem. Well, that was 5 years ago, so 6 years ago, whatever it was. So that all happened really fast, and was kind of out of character for me, and very much the circumstance of like, I'm not really sure who this Whitney is that's behaving in this totally non-traditional and really abnormal way, but there was something really exciting and attracted me to that lifestyle and to him. I'm very type A, very regimented, very routine based. He is the total opposite of me. So it was very much that opposites attract and appeal of just this unknown kind of lifestyle. So, like I said, kind of as soon as he moved in, he was waking up at 4 a.m. just happy as could be. Like it is the most patronizing thing to live with somebody who is that happy when you are not happy. there's nothing worse. Like we just, I always used to laugh because when we met, he didn't even have a vehicle, so I would drive him into work every day on my way into work, and he'd been up for 5 hours by that time. I was on my 10th cup of coffee and still half asleep, driving him into work, and he would just be in the car telling me about all the wonderful things he was going to do that day and all the amazing things he had read in the 5 hours that he'd been up that I'd been, dead to the world. And it was the most aggravating drive into work every morning for several months. Like just finally I just said to him, I can't drive you to work anymore. Like it's really setting me up for like not a good situation. We're getting into fights in the car. Like I don't want to be with you at that hour of the day. I was kind of that self-professed night owl. Like I hated mornings. I didn't want to start the day. It was, something for me where just don't talk to me before I've had, my 50 pots of coffee and I'm somewhat normal human status. So that was kind of the beginning of the end, I suppose. It took several more years though, because I am so type A and just very logical and routine based. I'd worked my entire life to get to this place. It was a huge part of my identity. I had also worked really hard within my law firm to establish a routine and name for myself and reputation. I had gotten some really good experience. And so there was a bit of, not everybody got that. I should be grateful for this. This is an opportunity that not everyone gets. Like, look at all of the amazing things that I have. At that point in time, I had a few clients. So I definitely had a level of commitment to those clients. I didn't want to, walk away from them. But for me, the scariest thing was that survival. Like, what do I do if I'm not a lawyer? How do I pay my bills? How do I make it work? We were living in Orange County. We were keeping up with the Joneses, barely, but how do I do that? How do I live that lifestyle if I don't have a consistent paycheck? Even if it's killing me, even if I hate it, even if I'm losing, relationships over it, even if I'm fighting with my soon to be husband every morning because of it, it was still a really scary thing as to, what that kind of movement point was going to be. But Chris and I had been together for, a couple years. We'd been living together, and it was, still kind of that grind. I was watching him test things. No, that doesn't work. I'm going to try this other thing. I was watching him fail at things and pick himself up and, sweep himself off and be successful at other things, which for me was kind of a first. Like, if you failed at something, that was the end. That was just, you didn't come back from that. So that was new to me. And so watching somebody with that sort of resilience, and there's a great book that I always tell people about because it was very pivotal during this point in time. It's called Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. And it talks all about, I'm not sure if you read it, but it talks all about the fixed versus the growth mindset and the people who kind of make decisions based on, both of those different personas. And I definitely, even still, struggle a lot with being more in that fixed mindset. Whether that's how I grew up, whether that's being a lawyer, whether that's, personality, whatever that is, it's still something that I'm very acutely aware of. My husband is very growth oriented, almost to a fault. And so it definitely creates, that dichotomy of watching somebody in the growth mindset always and realizing that, like, wow, that's so different than where I live and where my mindset is, and really starting to change kind of that mindset from the fixed to the growth. And how can I adapt that then into being a contributing human in society, but also feeling happy and fulfilled while I'm doing that. Kind of the tipping point that really changed it all was sort of a career making trial I had. It was, gosh, a beast of a case. We had acquired it from another law firm. We had been very successful on some dispositive motions, which essentially means we had gotten a lot of the case kind of kicked out before it went to trial, but it was still multi-million-dollar case. I was having to move to Central California for 8 weeks to try it. It was, I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity ever to be involved in that, to be, part of the preparation of that. It was a client that I had helped bring in, so I felt very committed to it. But kind of on the cusp of that trial happening, I was diagnosed with mono, like the kissing disease. Like, people who are 16 get that, not when you're in your late 20s.
Right.
So it was really this moment in time where I was laid out. I had a trial looming. I needed to get, for lack of a better word, I don't know if I can swear on here, but I need to get my shit together, and it was far from together. And it was kind of that moment where Chris looked at me and said, like, hey, listen, if this is your track in life, I support you. If you want to be partner and this is what it looks like, and you're going to move to Fresno for 8 weeks with mono to try this amazing case because it's going to be so good for your career, cool, I'm all for it. But what does that look like? Does it look like this? Because I don't really think I want to sign up for this. And more importantly, if we're talking about getting married and having kids and doing all of those things, what does it look like with the addition of that? Are you ditching with a whole family then for 8 weeks, and I get to be super dad for that period of time? You get to be a total, not nice person leading up to, preparation of that trial. And we all just have to deal with that without saying anything. And more importantly, is it going to take a few heart attacks for you to tone down a little? What does that look like? Your health is your body is literally rejecting this lifestyle that you're living. What are you going to do about that when it becomes bigger? Because it just gets bigger and better from there. So it was kind of at that point in time that I said, all right, let me get through this trial, see, what happens on the flip end of it, get my health in a better place. And I decided to actually delve into some personal development, which was kind of the first time that I had really done that, because my whole life I had wanted to be a lawyer. So I had been developing to be that professional person. There hadn't been a lot of personal development. I took this 6-week course from Lewis Howes, who is a lifestyle entrepreneur. It's called School of Greatness. I don't even know if he actually still has it, but they put you in like these little pods and you work with other entrepreneurs, and you get kind of the experience of group mentorship as well as then like the weekly lessons. And there was this great exercise in there where you had to write out what your perfect day was. Like if you just wanted the perfect day, vacation day, work day, like what does it look like? Write it down. And it was so depressing to me because I couldn't even think of what my perfect day looked like. Like I was so far into like the bogs of just somebody else's time, somebody else's schedule, somebody else's life, that I didn't even know what that looked like for me. I didn't know what made me happy. I didn't know what was fulfilling to me. And so that was a pretty big wake up call for me to really start evaluating like how I was living and whether or not that was, truly authentic to what I wanted to be doing. So took this course. I was still teaching spin at this time and thought, I like activewear. I like leggings, like living in leggings. Like maybe there's something I could do with that on the side, like drop shipping online, or, figure out some sort of kind of gig where I could make a little extra money and see, what happens. And the rise of subscription boxes was kind of just coming up at that time. So I thought, there's not really a subscription box for women's activewear. Maybe we could start that up. So Chris, myself, and another partner started, nights and weekends just cranking on this subscription box idea. I was still litigating full time, still working full time, but kind of, this could be a good exit plan, or at least some money that I could put aside so that if I wanted to leave, I would have, a little bit of nest egg sitting in the wings. And it sort of exploded a little bit faster than I think any of us expected it would. Divine timing, universal intervention. I don't know exactly what that was, right time, right place, but it certainly was a good team in terms of all of us having different sorts of skill sets, and working together to, kind of get things up and running. And it was an opportunity for me to say, okay, maybe I feel comfortable going part-time with the law firm. So luckily they were open to that. I was not a person who was ready to, say see ya without there being some sort of safety net. That's just not my personality in life and not something I was capable of. But there wasn't a giant savings account. It was just this other business that was kind of operating. I had one foot in the door still, one foot out. I kind of thought if things go south with, the subscription box, at least I can step full back into the litigation world. I know what that looks like. I know what it feels like. It's not great, but hey, it's comfortable. And it wasn't until my mom, who was 56 at the time, got diagnosed with brain cancer and died a few months later, that was kind of okay, life's too short. Like, it doesn't matter. That job will always be there waiting for you. You can always go back, maybe not at that law firm, but maybe a different one, maybe somewhere else, but like that job is always there. You always have that skill set. You can do that. So like, stop screwing around. It's time to, do something that's meaningful and is going to make you happy, and not something that you're wasting another day doing. So that was a very long-winded.
Well, I appreciate you taking us through that. A few things. One, I just want to say thank you, because I think it takes a lot of courage to reveal the truth of, I sort of, I do the straight talk here, but I was like, man, maybe I shouldn't ask Whitney that question. Like, you ask someone that, but just so that everyone, future guests, know that I will never leave my guests hanging out there. My wife and I did the same thing. I met my wife. She was totally opposite without going into all that, but I just don't want to leave you out there hanging and feel like I put you on the spot, because it takes a lot of courage to do what you have said here. And I'm really grateful for that. And I know our listeners will benefit from that for sure, but it's not easy. And I come from the East Coast, where it's very structured, and there was a very structured program for me that was supposed to happen. And it's very, very, very hard to break that structure and do that. So to take it back, my wife and I did the same thing. I met my wife. She was from California, totally different, like totally everything. She had moved across the country to a boarding school to ride horses when she's like 14. And, for me, it was like, wow, this 14-year-old woman, or girl at the time, makes the decision and basically moves 3,000 miles away from home, which in the structure world of what you came from and I came from is sort of like, you don't do that. You sort of stay in your home. You're going to get married to one of the, fine, unique women or men in your place. And then that's how it's going to happen. And we moved in together within probably 4 months. I was a lot like your husband. My car sort of worked. I was working a part-time job. I was going to school at the time. I was working another part-time job to pay for my startup. And it was really wacky. And we actually, which, there's a lot of people, I think our generation is a little bit different. And our parents' generation was, hey, you're going to fall in love. You're not going to move in together until you get married. And then you're going to do all this. My wife and I didn't get married for 14 years. And we lived together for 14 years. We've been together for 25 years. And I will tell everybody, it was really hard, right? Because like, why aren't you married? Why? And for us, we weren't going to have kids. And we have that pressure. Everybody like, well, you're not going to have kids. Well, that's what you're supposed to do. I'm like, where's that book? Like,
Right.
can you give me that book? Show me in the book what chapter is that? And why are you following that book? Because that's just not how it operates. So I just want to share that so that you're not out there alone, because it is very hard to do it. And I think the other thing that I would say for the listeners listening to you is it is very hard to leave a job and that you have and that safety net. Because Whitney, I know you and I have talked a little bit about this. There's so much, and I'm going to use the word because you already used it, shit out there that says, make the leap, make the jump, do the jump. Oh, you can just do the jump. I believe you should take the jump because I was built that way to sort of live that lifestyle. And I couldn't live me personally in that corporate world. And I was in it. And it was pretty much a matter of either I'm going to leave it eventually or I'm going to get fired because you don't fit in. Right. But I think that I sort of lost my train of thought where I was going with that, but the breaking that mold and it's not as easy to do as they say. And I think you do have to have that motivation pivotal. I call them pivotal moments. And I can walk back in my life to the actual day. Like it's so clear in my head when these things have happened. And it does take that for your mom. I mean, it's sad, terrible, terrible story, right? But everything in the world happens for a reason. So I think everybody should be sad about things is what I say. And we all, not everybody, but when you have these tragic things happen, right, which are would be the right word, you've got to go through that grieving in your own way. You got to structure it. And then I think you have to go and look for the reason why it happened. Because whether you believe it or not, I believe there's a reason that everything happens, good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't matter. But then find the reason and use that to your advantage. And that's what you effectively did, really. And sometimes I worry for the listeners out there that, as crazy as this may sound, don't have this tragic moment, right? Or don't have a sad story, so to speak, or, because that's the motivation. If you look at me, I grew up with a single mom with not a lot of money. So what's the drive? Like you can always go back. For you, traditional life, mom dies of cancer suddenly, and you're already at your breaking point. But truthfully, if your mom didn't have that, the question is, would have been getting married to Chris been enough to get you over? We don't know.
He'll tell you yes.
Oh, of course he will. I know he will. I haven't even talked to him yet, but I know him well enough already to know that, of course, he's going to say that. But the truth is without those pivotal moments. So on this pivotal moment that you have, do you remember the day that you put in your letter? Because there was a day, right? Yep. What did that look like?
Yep. It kind of was just at my wit's end. Like I just, I remember, so my parents lived in Las Vegas when she was diagnosed with cancer. We had done, my wonderful husband, who's amazing at research, had done a lot of research specifically about brain cancer. The University of San Diego has an amazing, amazing program for brain cancer. They do a lot of trials out of there. So we had elected to make the decision to go to San Diego, to move there, and to have her treatment in San Diego. And it was great for us because it was a little bit closer than Vegas was in terms of commuting. But for all intents and purposes, I was remote at that point in time. I was still part-time with the law firm, but I was working remotely. And it allowed me to be with my mom in San Diego for the entire time that she treated, and, the last few months of her life. But I remember, while she was treating, working on motions and, getting on calls with like one of my partners about something, that we were doing for one of these big motions that we were doing. And it was sort of one of those points in time where I was like, is this really a priority right now? Like, are we really talking about, yes, I understand it's a lot of money, but like someone's literally dying in my life. Like I'm watching someone die. She's got no speech left. She can't walk. She, can't do anything for herself. Like this super strong, powerful, independent force in my life is totally like, not able to do anything at this point in time. Like in terms of priorities, like, I'm really sorry, but your priority is just not a priority for me anymore. So I don't know that it was a specific day, but certainly that point in time was enough for me to kind of realize like there's just not a prioritization of this anymore in my life, in my world. And really after she died, then it was part of that almost grieving. Like I need to abandon this part of my life because life is too short. She was in perfectly good health until this happened. She was young. None of us saw this coming. Like, what a shocker. And if I died tomorrow, would I be satisfied with being 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door? Would I be satisfied with this like kind of tangential, like entrepreneurial endeavor that I'm doing? Would I be satisfied with my health, with my relationships, with all of the things in my life? And, really when you take an inventory of those things, it's that mortality motivation, essentially. Like if I'm dying, am I happy with how I lived my last day? And the answer for me was no. So, to make those changes was important. And not to get too ahead of myself here, but it also kind of aligned nicely with a realtor knocking on our door and offering us some money for our house. And we kind of thought, when the universe comes knocking, you listen. All those things happening at the same time sort of felt like, okay, there's some divine guidance or, whatever it is that's kind of also helping the energy here so that we are not stuck in this place and we're not holding on to this grief, but also grieving, some part of us that's dying because we're not, living full out and playing full out and doing all of the things that we wish we would have done, but didn't have the opportunity to do because disease happens or, whatever else. So certainly that point in time was, the point in time for me of just, okay, it's time to stop playing so small. Like this fear that you have is nothing compared to death. And so at this point in time, it's time to like jump or, you're going to die right here with her. So what's the point of that?
Yeah. I'm laughing, not because I'm laughing at it. It's because it's so true, right? Like, yeah, I say that to people. People tell me about that. They're like, oh, you live in California, you pay all these taxes. I'd be like, in 60 years, I'll be dead. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to, like, no offense to anybody, but I'm at the beach, like, I'm like, are you going to worry about that? And I think you have to rein that back in, because when you start getting yourself into these details and you don't take yourself out to 30 or 40, 50,000 feet, you lose sight of the fact that, yes, I'm an optimistic person and I believe I'm going to live forever. But the reality is, unless someone cracks that code really soon, like in the next 60 years.
I'm sticking.
Yeah, right. So am I going to bet on that and then go live in somewhere because of taxes? But the answer is no.
Also, not to get off on a huge tangent, but it's very apropos for you to mention that on New Year's Eve, because I don't know if you saw my Instagram stories from today, but I got on a little bit of a soapbox for a second because it really just drives me crazy. These people who are, 2019 was the worst year. Like, I just can't wait for 2020. And, this last year just had so much turmoil and stress and all of these things. And it's much in line, with what you're talking about in terms of finding joy in the process and in every day and living out every day, because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. So, January 1st is just a date on the calendar. Nothing changes unless you do. And, there's so much to be grateful for and so much progress and growth that comes from that struggle, that even if it was a challenging year, my gosh, imagine like what groundwork you've laid for, the months to come. So it sort of is appropriate that we're having this discussion on New Year's Eve, because I think that, every year sort of comes up for a lot of people with that, bah humbug, this year was not as great as I wanted it to be, and next year will be better. And it really is, part of that finding joy in every day and finding joy in the process and being, a joyous human, so that you are kind of living full out. And, you're right, not to be morbid, but our death is eventual.
It's not morbid. And
Yeah.
people say that's pessimistic. No, that's real. Like, and if you're not aware of that, when you start to really frame it and understand that you are going to sleep for 15 to 20 years of your life, from 0 or day 1 plus 1 to 21 for the most part, regardless if you went to college or whatever, your brain is literally still developing. Like, we're not even, I sometimes I'm like, God, they let me drive when I was 16 on the open roads. Like, my brain wasn't even functioning. I mean, that's a fact, as I went through development psychology when I was going through that. And I was like, God, that is crazy. But I think that you have to keep things in perspective and realize that, there is the new year to do something new, but you need to make that assessment every day.
Yeah.
And there was a student, I told my wife this morning, because she got up super early this morning. I was up late last night trying to get a podcast, because I've got this, I'm like you, we're like each other in many ways, Whitney. Like, I'm going to stay on that schedule. So I'm like, hey, we're going to publish this podcast tonight. And my wife had gotten home. We went out to dinner real quick, and it was late. And I'm very regimented about when I go to bed. I need to be asleep by 9:50 is my rule. But I stayed up late because I had this other rule that I needed to publish the podcast. And there's 2 students of mine who are doing something. They're not, I wouldn't call them digital nomads yet, but it's called Quench Your Adventure, and they are traveling around and trying to use that to build a business. And they're building a following. And once they get there, I know they're going to be able to make it. But they're in Mexico somewhere. The hotel didn't go right. Like, everything is going wrong for them. In fact, they can't, I didn't even look at their story this morning, but last night the story was they couldn't find any money because all the money machines were out of money in Mexico for whatever reason. They can't get any pesos, right? Their hotel is screwed up. And she said, when we got married, they went to, I guess, whatever church they're a member of. They have pre-counseling. And they said, look, times are going to be stressful. It's going to be awful. And when those things do and you start to fight, just say, we're making memories. We're making memories. So she's in the car saying we're making memories. And my wife had gotten up at like around 5 this morning. And in general, it's not like her. She doesn't get up as early as I do. She just we're both we're both about an hour and a half off of each other. Right. So she's walking around and something's bothering her. And I was like, look, and I said, why are you annoyed? Why are you being so annoying this morning? She's like, oh, I got this stuff going on. I said, we're just making memories, baby. We're just making memories. I mean, and I think you just have to do that, not just with your spouse and partner, which is, I think you see what it does. Like, even I said that to you and you started laughing because it's true, right? Because you know that you and Chris have those conversations and you're like, well, we're making memories. It lightens it. But I think you got to remember that about everything in life. However bad, however good or whatever. And the other thing that I say to people is, like, everybody has a sad story. Like, we all have sad stories. So one day you're going to decide to either leave that sad story behind in the sense of letting it affect the future of your life. I'm not saying that you don't acknowledge it. I'm not saying that it's not a part of who you are, but you've got to decide that you're not going to let that affect you anymore because you don't have that much time left. So you and I could probably do 6-hour seminar on this on New Year's Eve, but we won't. I want to come back. You're at this time. Do you remember, though, the day that you wrote your resignation letter? Like, do you remember that specific day?
I don't know if I remember writing the resignation letter. I actually went in, I had a really great relationship with our managing partner. And so I actually went in, when I went in to tell him I was going part-time, I was so nervous he was going to tell me to hit the road. Forget it. We don't want you part-time. It's all or nothing. And so that was more of a monumental moment for me, that like step from full-time to part-time, because it's not traditional. It's not something that most lawyers do. And it was totally out of the box for what any of the other lawyers in our firm were doing. So I think that was more pivotal for me. I remember like how much my voice was shaking even talking to him, like, presenting him with this option, because he totally could have told me to just take a hike and sorry, we're not interested. So that was the point in time for me that, was very memorable. Going back in to tell him that I was quitting officially, though, was a lot harder, just because I still had a lot of attachment to the commitment I had made there. Which, in hindsight is just so silly, because it is like, they're a business, like yes, of course, like, you're a good attorney. We're sad to see you go. Like, you had good client relationships, et cetera, but I'm totally replaceable. Like, I'm not a unique snowflake in any way that like cannot be, somebody else put in my place and, doing the same work that I was doing. So it sort of is, in hindsight, kind of funny to look back and remember how bad I felt about leaving, because I really felt like, oh, you'd given me this opportunity to go part-time. I had done that for a year. It was working so well, but it was really my time to kind of, say like, listen, this actually isn't working for me because of X, Y, Z, and all of these other things that, had kind of transpired. But certainly it felt a little bit better not telling him, hey, I'm bouncing to go to a different law firm. It was like, hey, I'm bouncing because I just don't want to do this life anymore. I'm becoming an entrepreneur, and we're selling our house, and we're moving, and we're going to travel and do all these things. And I'm sure he looked at me like, wow, you are absolutely nuts. But, in my world, in that season of life, it just was like, okay, this is just a necessity at this point in time. So I don't know that the second meeting was very memorable, except for I remember feeling really bad. It was more that first step, with like, let me go non-traditional in this totally traditional business. Like, can you work with me to, do kind of this more part-time remote gig, instead of, the traditional lawyer route.
Well, I think that's a good journey though for people too. One is to recognize that when you do the transition, and I recommend for all entrepreneurs that are going to transition from anything, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a plumber, whether you're a mechanic, whatever that is, that you do have a transition plan. And your transition plan was recognition that you didn't want to do it. You got a side hustle going, which started to make you believe
right,
that you can make money in a different way other than getting a paycheck every 2 weeks.
yep,
And then you went part-time, which most people don't even think of because they think the same thing you did,
right,
which is they'll never let me do it, so I'm not going to ask. Well, like, what's the harm in doing that? So
right.
you get the part-time, and I want to ask you a question about that, but then just to continue the journey, and then eventually you leave. One more question on the part-time. So did you have like 2 envelopes? Hey, if you don't give me part-time, I leave? Or like, what was the plan?
I wish I could say I was even that prepared. It's actually kind of full circle moment, because one of the partners that I have now, was a great mentor for me during this whole process, in terms of, ask, like, just ask. You never know unless you ask. And so he had suggested, instead of going in there with an ultimatum, it more being let me just have a conversation with you about where I'm at. This is what's transpired. I've created this side hustle. It is busy enough that I cannot continue pursuing this job full time with full commitment. I would really like to stay here because, I want to honor my commitments. I have clients. I'm still feeling tied to this particular job. Can I go part-time? Is that even something you'd be willing to consider? And much to my surprise, the managing partner said to me, listen, like, I'm all ears. So if you want to put together a proposal and send it to me, I'm happy to like have a further conversation with you about that. So it wasn't even A or B, pink or blue, like pick which pill you want to take. It was more just, having that conversation. And it's really something that I know you and I have talked offline about this, but it's something that particular meeting is so pivotal for so many reasons, but in an entrepreneurial journey is so pivotal for so many reasons, because we put ourselves in these boxes, right? This is who I am. This is my identity. This is my skill set. This is what I can do. And that's it. And, when it comes to making money, when it comes to doing things outside your comfort zone, when it comes to engaging in new businesses that you never thought were in your realm of expertise or possibility, entrepreneurship and surviving as an entrepreneur, at least in my experience, has been pushing the outside limits of those boxes. that box, it not being traditional, it not being what I thought it was going to look like, and it not being necessarily within the confines of what societal norms are, right? So it isn't, and never has been since I had that meeting. It never has been a situation of like, oh, I'm a lawyer, so I'm just going to go and do some entrepreneurial lawyer activities, right? Like it's all of these other things and all of these, a little bit from here, a little bit from here, a little bit from here that are kind of mishmashed together that I never even realized were a possibility, and never would have explored had I not had the cojones to actually go in, have this meeting with the partner, suggest something that, was not traditional, and more importantly, have him be receptive to that. And it is such a testament that I think a lot of people miss in the entrepreneurial journey of just, it's going to be painful and it's going to be uncomfortable. And there's going to be those weird conversations where you're like, can I do this? But if you never ask, you're never going to find out. So, what's the harm in asking? The worst he was going to tell me was hit the road.
Yeah, right. And then you would have figured it out because you had a side hustle that you had already started. Whether it was going to pay the bills or not didn't matter. It was going to get you enough money to basically live. And one thing I'll say about the box is what I tell people is you put yourself in that box at this moment, and that is where you were. But actually, you can choose at this very moment to step outside the box and change what that box looks like.
Yep.
You can. Your past is not, yes, it will shock people, right? And people will tell you, that's not like you, Whitney. That's really not like you. We know you as a lawyer. You're normally dressed up. Like, and you should expect that because you just stepped outside the box. But you can take control. You are in control. People don't acknowledge or understand that they are, to basically step outside that box and become someone different. And it's okay to become someone different. Like, I think it's almost, you have to give permission, like, hey, you can be someone different tomorrow.
Totally.
It doesn't matter. And when you become someone different, people in your past life who are comfortable in that box, you will not be friends with, you will not, because it will change.
Yeah.
And in fact, you need that change to keep you going on that momentum, because there's always going to be the person who's like, oh, I don't know, Whitney, that might not work. Well, that might not work. We all know it, right? I call them negative Nancy's.
Well, they're more comfortable with you being subpar because that is what they're comfortable with, right? It's who they know you as.
And most of the people, not most, I don't want to say everybody because you shouldn't, but I'm being very careful here. Most people are projecting their own insecurities onto you to keep you in a box that makes them even more insecure and uncomfortable.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's what's going on here. And I'm not I'm supposed to be a professional at this stuff. And even it's hard for me to recognize it. Right. So sometimes you got to like, okay, this is what's happening. But I just wanted to say that because I think it's an important, really important point that you brought up that you had recognized, and that a lot of listeners out there that I encounter don't understand. And the other part I just want to emphasize 100 times is that while you had the courage to make the journey, there was a transition. So it wasn't like you said, hey, I'm going to quit and I've got this idea. I mean, you actually did have some sales. You were seeing what is possible. How big the business would become is, I don't know. I'm not going to ask you if you had a business plan because it doesn't sound like you have a business plan. I tell everybody you got to have a business plan, but you were at least trying it and you knew that. So I want to, did someone come knocking on your door to buy your house and that's what prompted you to leave, or was it the other way around? And then what happened?
Yeah, so let's see, my mom passed away in mid-May. I quit the job entirely shortly thereafter. And in July, so 2 months later, someone knocked on our door. We lived in a super family friendly neighborhood. Like everyone was always like, why don't you guys have kids? Like, it's so weird you live here. Like, this is the wrong neighborhood for you all. So a realtor came knocking on our door. It was, right before school was starting, and said, is your house up for sale? And we said no. And so she left, and we kind of thought, should our house be up for sale? Maybe this is something we should be doing here. And Chris, my husband, had been, a digital nomad in a prior life before we had met. So for him, this was always like, yes, let's leave, let's travel, let's do all these things. You don't have any attachment here anymore. Like, why not? And so we contacted our realtor after that, and yeah, our house went really fast. Like, I think we listed in mid-July and was gone by beginning of August, and we were out of there by end of August. So it all happened really fast, but it just felt very much like, okay, well, this is just the next step. Like, there's just kind of like what I said earlier, if the universe comes knocking, you better listen, because how often are you going to get that opportunity? And Southern California housing was a great time to sell. We made some good money, so it kind of just all logically made sense. And not to beat a dead horse, but much to your point earlier as well, that transition of what happened, I would love to say that business, that subscription box business, made us millions of dollars. And that's how we are now continuing to travel as digital nomads. But unfortunately, it didn't. And it has been, honestly, just a state of transition since then. There hasn't been stability. There hasn't been consistency. It has been just a forever exploring and pivoting and starting new things and trying new things and kind of doing everything under the sun. We probably have more stability now, than we did a year ago, but it certainly has not been anything of, I made this jump and then transition ended. It has just been a constant state of influx now, much by our own doing. We're digital nomads, I guess, for the listeners, anybody who hasn't caught on, don't have a home base now, so we don't live anywhere. We had the intention of selling our house and traveling for a couple months, and that was, August of 2017. So,
So when you sold your house, and you're like, oh, and then we went, where did you go? And for all the listeners, I can attest to the fact that Whitney actually has no home, because before we got on the air, I said, can you tell me where your home base is? Because I when I do the intro, I want to say, oh, and Whitney and Chris are from, and
yeah.
They're very clear to me after pressing Whitney in a very lawyer-like style that she is telling the truth. There is no home base. But when you sell your house and you say, and we went to, like,
where did we go?
Yeah. Like, and how did you think about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I had decided I wanted to do yoga teacher training. Specifically after my mom died. My mom was very spiritual. She was a Reiki master, which is a whole other call for another time. I grew up, with a very strong female presence, but she was a little woo. And I think some of that rubbed off on me as well. It's this wonderful gray zone and black and white zone kind of mixed together in my personality that comes up in lovely ways every once in a while. But the yoga teacher training for me was something that I needed to grieve and needed to kind of soothe my soul after my mom had passed away. So there was an amazing yoga studio in Southern California that I had felt really attached to, and I had signed up for the yoga teacher training before we sold our house. So for the first 3 months, I guess it would have been, until just after Thanksgiving, for the first 3 months, we rented different Airbnbs on the weekends, which is when the yoga teacher training was in Southern California, so that I could finish my yoga teacher training. Two of our friends actually who lived up in Sausalito were going to travel to Italy for an extended period of time. So we rented their house off of them and lived there during the week for the first portion of that. And then for the latter half of that, I can't even remember where we were during the week, just bouncing around to different Airbnbs in different locations. By this point in time, we'd sold pretty much all of our stuff. We had a small storage unit with, clothes and personal items and that sort of thing, but that was it. We still had our cars in Southern California, so we would just navigate, parking those somewhere when we were up in NorCal during the week, and then use them when we were in SoCal on the weekends. And then after I graduated from the yoga teacher training, we decided, let's actually do some traveling. Like, this is what we said we were going to do. We just gotten married. We got married in September of that year. So we decided that would be kind of an extended honeymoon for us. So we went to Europe for a couple months and just traveled around, lived out of Airbnbs. We did the thing where you do 3 days here, 5 days here, 6 days here. We had kind of a new business endeavor that my husband was getting involved with and needed some legal assistance. So I'd been kind of involved in that. And it was a very good lesson for us in learning that bouncing around with that 3-day, 5-day thing was not going to work for us. We were in Italy, and this is totally first world problems, but we were in Italy and had scheduled all of these wine tastings and food tours and all sorts of wonderful stuff And we were in Florence only for 4 days. And I was negotiating this deal on my husband's behalf. And because of the time change, I was having to stay up all night to do that. So sleep all day. And I was missing all of these like wine tours and like food tours. My husband was going and coming home and saying like what an amazing time he'd had. So there again, first world problems, like crying the river, I know, but it
But
definitely
you were working on a business. Like you just didn't like check out. And I just want the listeners to be clear that
yeah,
you're
this was
working.
none of this time was like downtime. Like we were literally throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what would stick. It was a forever, and has continued to be a forever endeavor of, how can we evolve? How can we get better? What else can we do? What is interesting? What's exciting? And
did you kill the leggings business, or do you still have this going on?
We're still alive, with barely a pulse. It's not a subscription box anymore. It's a software system at this point in time. So we've actually converted the back end to a software system that we license out now.
So it was I know you told me you do an MLM. Was that the leggings, or is that something else?
Oh, something else.
Okay, so we'll get to that. But for the leggings, how did you promote that? Because a lot of entrepreneurs out there, we're talking about what you did in the transition, which is awesome. But actually, the nuts and bolts, like, did you go on Instagram and wear all these leggings and basically
that ads? I taught fitness too for a long time, so I had a built-in kind of network of people who were enjoying activewear and living in it. And I do have to say that location was a big consideration there too. South Orange County is lots of money and lots of women who are interested in looking good, and activewear had kind of taken on a new life at that point in time. People were wearing it out, not just to work out, but actually as their street apparel. So it was.
So are you selling it out of your, I'm getting into the details here, I know, but were you selling it out of your trunk?
No, so it was a subscription box. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Stitch Fix or Wantable. Yeah. So the idea was users signed up for a monthly fee. You got a box that was shipped to you every month. And eventually we did every 3 months and every 6 months, or whatever time increment that you wanted these boxes shipped to you. It usually had between 6 and 10 items in it. So leggings, sports bras, tank tops, all sorts of stuff.
And you were buying these leggings, sports bras, and all sorts of stuff wholesale.
Right.
And packing them in your living room?
Yes, literally in our living room.
Okay, there we go. This is how it's happening.
Right. Yeah, literally in our living room, bootstrapping, like we're funding this ourselves. There's no money at this point in time. At inception, we eventually did get a small angel round, which was very helpful. Obviously keeping the business afloat. And then, these boxes would get sent out to these women who had ordered it, and it was a pay for what you keep. So you send back what you don't want. If you liked items, you had the convenience of trying them on in your home, and you just sent back everything else. So you paid for what you kept.
And what are the economics of that look like? Because you bought that whole, what was that?
Challenging, I said.
Yeah, sorry, you broke up. So I want the listeners to understand this, that, and I'm intimately familiar with the subscription box. I don't want to say it was one of the early, but I used to have a fly of the month club for my fishing site in 1998. So I'm not that old, but old enough to have done that. So I that's challenging, right? Because you have a shipping cost that comes back from an economic standpoint. And what did you do with this inventory that they didn't want? Or did most people not send things back?
No, the return rate is huge on subscription boxes, especially when it's a pay for what you keep. And majority of our items were expensive. They aren't $15 leggings. They're, $50 leggings or $100 leggings. So most people are not keeping more than 1 or 2 items per box, if we're lucky. And it is what made us realize quickly that the money was not in the subscription box itself, but in the software that we were building. Again, kind of, it's funny. My mom always used to tease me that I had a horseshoe shoved up my bum, because really lucky things always seem to happen to me. I like to think that that's more a portrayal of hard work and right time, right place, and good relationships and all those other things. But a lucky thing that happened to us in this particular business was we connected with an amazing developer who ended up joining our founders team. Also a female developer, which in that space, there are very few females. So that was fun for us to be able to work on a predominantly female team. It was 3 female partners and my husband, Chris. And she was really interested in artificial intelligence and utilizing the back end of our system to actually predict women's preferences when it comes to activewear, using kind of their past purchase history, information from social media. We started getting feedback from the people as to why they were returning some of the items that they were returning. Was it color? Was it fit? Asking more pointed questions in our intake process for subscribers. What is it that you're looking for out of your activewear? And then utilizing all of those aspects, to create algorithms to predict what those women would like then kind of going forward. So certainly that helped with, our ability to increase sales, because if you're sending someone something they like, they're more likely to purchase it. But inventory was a huge issue for us, and housing a lot of inventory was a huge issue for us. In addition to then having to restock new inventory for all of the people who then had already seen a number of those items or had received, those items in their box. So it became quickly apparent to us that the logistics of that was very complicated and something that was going to be more expensive than actually turning this back end system, like what we created, what she built from the ground up, turning that into a product that then we could license to other subscription boxes, because there were so many popping up, at that point in time. So we stopped sending out boxes actually relatively quickly, which limited our exposure in terms of how much inventory we actually had. Although I will admit that we still have a storage unit with some.
Yeah. So raise my hand to that. I tell people I got pictures. I try to teach lessons about that. I'm like my journey and my brother's journey, and that was very interesting. We finally figured it out after literally, Whitney, I think it was probably just a year ago that we emptied out my mom's garage with our final inventory. But anyway, what did you do with the returns? Did you just stick it in a box and that's what's in the storage unit now? Or did you?
Well, so the returns were never worn. They were still new with tags. Like you could try them on in your home, but the second that it was worn, it was a situation where you purchased that now. So all of that inventory could be recycled to anyone else, who's a new subscriber or who had never seen that item, but would have fallen within their preferences. So the idea was, a lot of the inventory that we had was just being circulated through our subscribers, depending on what their preferences were. Eventually we got a little smarter and negotiated some better deals with some of, the wholesalers in terms of, let us swap inventory with you. So if the inventory is only a month or 2 old, there's no disincentive for you giving us new inventory. We can buy more from you that way and sell more and, kind of do things that way. But yeah, it was a big issue. I mean, and something that, since we've mentored a few companies that are doing subscription boxes in a similar way, and it's a challenge. I think a lot of the companies that are doing well are big companies that have multiple lines of clothing that they're doing. And a lot of who we've talked to, they actually do, their leftover inventory, they sell to, discount shops. So you take a hit on that when it comes to your bottom line. So my very humble opinion is that that is not where the money is. I think that if you have the ability to flip that business into something more like what we did with that back end usage, that you can make more money there for a lot less headache. But it was a great learning experience, and certainly something with starting from infancy, packing boxes in our living room, quickly discontinuing that, and then moving more into the technical end of things, which actually is a great segue, because that artificial intelligence is really what then catapulted into, most of our endeavors now, not the MLM, that's kind of the health and wellness sector still, but that is a big bulk of what we're doing now with, both in the financial space and in the legal technology space. So, thank goodness that we had that experience, even though I wouldn't necessarily call it a win. Thank goodness we had that experience, because that is really what got us interested and, really started kind of that thirst for the knowledge about artificial intelligence and algorithmic learning and how to utilize that in different spaces.
Yeah. And I think it's important. I tell my students, stop. At some point, you're going to need to stop listening to me and everyone else, and you're going to have to do it. Because once you start doing it, whether it's like you did, which is, hey, I'm going to do a subscription box, I'm going to promote it on Instagram, I'm going to promote it to my classes, which I'm sure you did to the people that you taught, making them aware of it. And, or I tell people, just start selling on eBay.
Yep.
Just start selling on Amazon. Just go to Fiverr and make some stuff up. I mean, not make it up, but if you're a lawyer, and we're
Yep.
going to get to this, you can create a service to advise lawyers on something. If
Yep.
you're, whatever you do, you can create something to do that and just start doing it, but have the mindset that this will not be the end. You're open to it being the end thing, but you don't have your heart set on it that it is, because the moment your heart's set on it is the moment that you're basically dead.
I think it's almost that I wish I could tell myself plan to fail. Like just plan to fail, because it's going to explode. It's going to be terrible. There's going to be awful things that happen, but what you learn from that is what's going to be the next thing, right? Because we get so caught up in this, I don't want to do it unless it's perfect, or I don't want to do it unless it's going to be successful. And so much of the time it is more so just plan to fail. Plan that's going to be horrendous and that you're going to have to pivot or that you're going to have to learn how to do something else, or that you're going to use that skill set to then move into something else. Because yeah, it's that, if you never start, you're never going to start. There will be nothing ever. But there is so much, I hate to use the word failure because it's growth really, right? But there is so much in the beginning that is, and still, oh, that didn't work. Okay, I guess like on to the next thing. Like, I thought that was it, but that's cool. Like, what else can I do with this now?
I would, the failure is sort of the buzzword, right? And especially here in Silicon Valley, and people
Right.
use it. But really what I think it is your customers, you're not really failing. What you're doing is you're getting corrected and informed of what the customers that you're reaching actually want.
Right.
And if you start engaging and stop telling the customer what you think they need, and there's a little bit of that in the world. Steve Jobs said you can't ask a consumer what they want because they don't even know what they want until they see it. And there is absolutely some of that. But there's also some of it is give them something and then just listen to them.
Yep.
Because if I say, hey, Whitney, does this work for you?
Right.
No, Brandon, it doesn't work for me because of X, Y, 3 reasons. Hey, you just gave me 3 reasons to go build the product that you will buy.
Right.
And that's the key. So let's just recap for everybody listening so far. Someone offers you money for your house. You quit your job. You guys move to not move. I don't even know what you call it. Digital nomads call it.
Move to our suitcases. Yep.
Yeah. You downsize your crap. You go to Europe. You're working on the business. It sounds like at this point you're not packing boxes. You pivoted into a model where you're licensing the software. And I don't want to say that that's on. Nothing's on auto, because this whole passive income thing, I think people need to understand. Passive income just means that you can make money when you're not working, but you need to work a lot to get the engine working. You have the software now sort of on this autos, so to speak, thing, and you pivoted into using that AI engine for other things. You're in Italy, you're negotiating a deal for your husband, and now what happens? Because
Yeah.
you're not on the wine tours and
No.
Chris is. So I don't know. Imagine you were making too many memories there.
No, there was not a lot of joy happening in my life at that point in time. A lot of bitterness and resentfulness. No, I mean, and at that point in time, I wish I could even say that, the back end of our subscription box was going well. But even at that point, we were still figuring out with our developer the best way to do that, trying to pitch the deal to people for people to actually license and subscribe to it, putting our pitch deck together for all of that stuff. So, I mean, that wasn't even really generating any income, so to speak. It was more just in the wings. Like, this could potentially be really awesome once we get our stuff together to actually make it awesome and, pitch it to be awesome. So my husband at that point in time had some, pretty exciting things happen. He has been a financial trader for many, many, many years. Among his entrepreneurial endeavors. That's kind of how he's funded his life. And so he'd gotten in, to some investments and some opportunities with, kind of getting a hedge fund up and running. And so that was kind of this deal that we were working with in the crypto space, which didn't actually end up coming to fruition, thank goodness, looking back. But that's kind of that's what we were transitioning into. And I was playing a bigger role in that because there again, kind of this adoption of knowledge of artificial intelligence and learning, what cryptocurrency was. And gosh, there was so much exciting stuff happening in terms of the legal realms of cryptocurrency. There still is. the legal realms of cryptocurrency that was really fascinating to me. So I thought, oh, maybe that's the next thing. Maybe that's the thing that's going to, wake me up and make me excited. So still traveling, still kind of doing all those things. By that point in time, we decided that this 3-day, 5-day thing wasn't working, and that we needed to, post up for a few weeks at a time in whatever location we were in. And since then, that's been kind of our MO. So, we try not to book out more than a month or two in advance. My husband feels overcommitted if he has plans for tomorrow, and I get an anxiety attack if I don't have, the next 12 months of my life scheduled. So our balance is kind of 1 to 2 months out, or compromise. And yeah, we try to post up in a location anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks, just depending on where the location is, what the time zone is like, how inconvenient that will be with whatever projects we're kind of working on. So my husband, was really excelling in, finance and using algorithmic trading and, really getting involved in more on the investment side of things, which was great. Which kind of left me then, after this deal fell through with our hedge fund and my role with that was kind of done, it kind of left me with, well, now what? I'm not a lawyer. This like e-commerce company we had, Subscription Box, is kind of, it's like in the wings, but I don't know if that's making me super excited or that anything's happening with that. And so it was kind of this year of just exploration, yes, okay, we're traveling, we're doing all these fun things. Maybe I'll start a blog. That's fun, but like, I don't really want to keep track of that. Like, yeah, there's lots of cool ways to make money. I got into some affiliate marketing, started kind of doing, things to make a few bucks here and there, which another great lesson of just, there's so many ways, not to sound facetious, but there's so many ways to make money if you look outside your realm of how you think money should be made. But none of those were for me super fulfilling or something that I was really passionate about, or, there wasn't, everyone kept telling us, oh, you should, start an Instagram page and you could get all your travel paid for. Okay, well, that's a boatload of work to, update that and keep recommendations coming and all of those things. And that's not really in alignment either with, what is fulfilling to me. So I kind of got back into the health and wellness space. We'd been traveling around Italy, and as I'm sure you can imagine, the wine and pasta took its toll. And I thought, how can I stay fit, on the go, on the road? So I wound up signing up for Beachbody, which is, they have online workouts, online nutrition, supplements, all sorts of stuff. I started having some pretty great success from that, especially while we were traveling. So I kind of thought, well, if I can do this while I'm traveling, like, what's everyone else's excuse? So I really just started sharing about that. And, as we kind of talked
where were you sharing that?
On Instagram and Facebook. So just social media,
and were you, I'm being specific just to give the listeners some idea, because they hear these stories.
Sure.
And I want them to know that it's not just posting. And I'll go back, you can build a great business if you are going to travel and write about that. But to your point, you got to enjoy writing and documenting it, because, and I lived that with my fishing site back in the day, and it is work. It will make that fun thing.
Right.
Not necessary. You're going to have to change your mindset. I mean, I tell people, PST, whatever it is, PDST or whatever it is from fishing, because, and people are like, oh my God, I really feel sad for you. But yeah, when I had that fishing thing, like I felt like I had to fish 200 days a year. It got to the point where I'm catching the fish, trying to have fun, but I need to take a picture of the fish because that's what you got to do.
Yep.
And, I really did. I got burned out. I mean, I think I'm going fishing this Friday for a few days, and it'd be the first time I went fishing in like 6 years. For real, other than going with my nephew, who, I love catching fish with him and haven't seen him have fun, but really have not done any fishing for myself, so to speak, as being the center. But I think people have to understand that you are going to have to change that, and it will change the experience. It's not, hey, we're going to go to Italy and we're going to drink some wine and then we're going to chill out at night and then going to have a romantic time with my partner and it's all going to be love. No, because you're going to have a phone in your face.
Yep.
And so, but it's possible. And I know it's possible, right? You could.
And if you love blogging and capturing things and accounting for stuff and being attached to your devices 24/7, like maybe that is the job. That is kind of, I think, the biggest lesson that I've learned is, and I know we talked about this offline already, but there are so many ways for you to make money. And I don't mean that to sound in a condescending way, but I think if we abandon this idea that it needs to just be one thing, like this is going to be my $1 million idea, like throw that out the window and have a few $10,000 a year ideas, right? Like if you combine a bunch of different incomes together, it doesn't ever take the fun out of stuff, because much like this Beachbody experience for me, I didn't get into it anticipating I was going to be a millionaire. I didn't get into it planning for that to be a full-time thing. It isn't a full-time thing, but it's a nice income bump every month. And it's just me sharing the workouts that I'm doing or the supplements that I'm drinking or how I'm staying healthy on the road. And so selfishly has created more benefit for me than probably it has even in terms of the financial wherewithal, right? Like for me, that's more important to stay healthy and be accountable and feel good and feel energized and be connected with other humans as well, right? Because we're traveling all the time. So having that kind of face-to-face contact is great. But I think we get so caught up in this idea that you need to have just one business that's generating all of your income for you. And I actually think it's quite the opposite. I think that you are allocating your risk much more efficiently if you're having multiple streams of revenue that are each bringing in, different sums of money and allowing you then to, okay, this one stream over here isn't as interesting to me anymore, or in this season of life isn't something that is as fulfilling for me or as possible for me. So let that one, don't abandon it, but let it kind of fall by the wayside for a second and, focus on those other streams of revenue. For us, that has what has enabled us to continue traveling and living this lifestyle and doing it in the fashion that we want to do it. It hasn't been just one business or one revenue stream. It's been trying out all of these different things, figuring out what's fulfilling for us, and kind of continuing down that path of that particular revenue stream.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I have it in my notes right here from when we did talk offline and you talked about, I never thought, your comment was, I never thought that you could make money in so many different ways. And I thought that was a good, it was really a good epiphany, so to speak, that you're so trained that you're going to get this paycheck every 2 weeks and everything else feels uncomfortable. I was trying to be completely honest with you, over the last few days, as I was thinking about us on this show, how I was going to balance what you said in some way for people, because as an entrepreneur myself, for my my whole career, I always have believed as an entrepreneur that you should have multiple streams of income.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is very important. I was trying to think of how I was going to answer. I'm just going to make this up on the spot because I really didn't get to a place, because you had said, hey, Chris and I have a number. I thought you said 10 to 12. When you and I talked, you said I have 10 to 12 streams. And I was thinking, how could I put that into context for people? Because I think sometimes you have to have this mindset that if you're going to try these things and you're going to get them going, that you're going to lean into the one that starts making money.
Yep.
And then you're probably going to keep the 2 and 3 warm.
Yep.
But because I always talk about, we need this thing called absolute focus. So if you do want to get to multiple 6 figures, you want to get to 7 figures, you want to get to 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million, like there's this progression. Because once you're at, in my experience from all the things that I've done, once you're at like $200,000, it's in revenue, and hopefully it's profitable. Because if it's not profitable, that's a whole other thing. Like people tell me they have revenue and profit different, but let's just talk about $200,000. You're making a good margin. Say it's a media business or even reselling something. You got 50 points, so you're making 6 figures. Is that at that point you have to decide if you're going to lean into it, because it will never. I say never. Mom will kill me. It will rarely go from 200 to 10 million without you allocating almost all of your effort to get it there, because building a business is super hard, but it have the potential. So and another analogy is my brother and I got into the apparel business. And I'll just say this real quick. We decided that we're going to build one apparel brand. And it was a fishing apparel brand. We said, we're going to build one brand. That's it. You couldn't talk us out of it, right? We were going to build it. That's the way it was going to be. And what we realized was we started saying, oh my God, the risk is so high. It's not happening as fast as we want. Got all this inventory. We totally screwed this up. and then what we said was, let's build 12 brands. And people say, well, that's just crazy. Well, no, that's what big companies do, right? They build 12 brands. You put in enough effort that you can see which one sticks. The one that sticks, you lean into and you take off. And that's exactly what happened. So I
And
don't know if you agree or disagree, but
I think it's an important distinction that you've made, because when I say 10 to 12 different revenue streams at any given time, I don't mean that we've started 10 to 12 different businesses. Those aren't separate 10 to 12 different entities. I think that there's a fine line between business ADD and never actually putting enough eggs in your basket versus putting too many eggs in.
I appreciate it. And I did not agree to pay you before this, but I'm very thankful for you telling people that.
It's so true. I guess and I should also preface that it makes people really angry when I tell them how I never realized how many ways there were to make money. And I appreciate that there's a lot of people out there struggling and not able to access, those different revenue streams. So I qualify all of that by saying I acknowledge all of that. And certainly, yes, I'm coming at this from a different perspective. But when I say different revenue streams, I think more so what I mean is, if you want to start blogging and you have a travel blog, that's great. That isn't necessarily one revenue stream, though. Your travel blog can have ads. It can have affiliate marketing. It can have paid partnerships. It can have, maybe you have an MLM business that you promote on your blog, right? So suddenly your blog, which is just one business that you've started, has 4 different revenue streams. So I think that it's an important distinction, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it isn't something where we just run 12 different businesses. That would be absolutely astronomically insane, and I would not be sitting here talking to you today because
some of these entrepreneurs out there, they do say that. They're like, I have 80 businesses. I'm like, maybe, like, I'm willing to acknowledge that maybe I can't do that, but geez, that sounds like a shit ton of excuse my French, but it just seems overwhelming. So I'm really grateful that you said that. Let's come back to your MLM and selling supplements. You're doing Beachbody. You're having results. Another important thing, I think, is that you actually were using the product.
Yep.
You documented the journey.
Yep.
You've got before and after pictures, which absolutely essential in this business model. And are you, you're using Instagram and Facebook.
Yep.
Are you hashtagging things to get followers? If you're willing to share just a little bit of the strategy?
Sure, yeah. I think your intention is the most important part of this. If you're getting into something to make money, that's going to come through right away. So I think sharing the journey authentically is like number one. And my motivation from the beginning has been selfishly my own results, not necessarily the money. So that's been kind of just a bonus for me. And then secondary to that is building the community. We travel, so I don't have, classes that I can go take with the same people every week. So it was important to me to build a community of people online where we had, mutual accountability and kind of that online camaraderie of health and fitness as well. In terms of building following, honestly, my biggest success rate has just been engagement. It's slow, it's a grind, but if you're authentically engaging with people, that's a great way to, make sure that the people who are following you are people who actually give a crap about you, right? Like, they're not fake followers. I'm not doing the follow, unfollow, even the hashtags. Like, tried that for a little while, and you might get some followers, but are those really the people who you want to be connected with, or who are actually following your journey because they like your journey? Or are they people who are, following you because they understand the growth game on social media and want to be a part of that? So, it's funny, I was talking to someone recently, and we had this whole conversation about following and Instagram following and Facebook following and all of these things, because a lot of the different revenue streams that we have, even if they're small revenue streams, come off of social media. And it is something where, sure, you get 10,000 followers on Instagram and you get your swipe up feature, which might be nice for additional marketing perks. But really, the engagement of your users and, who it is that is actually viewing your content is what you need to care more about, not necessarily, from my experience, not necessarily those numbers. Meaning, if you have 200 followers, but 100 of those people are willing to buy something from you because they really care about you, guess what? Your 200 followers is going to be way more valuable than the person who has 20,000 followers, but one person is willing to buy something from them, right? So I think it's also that authenticness of just what is it that you're using that platform for? How are you sharing that? But really, what is your engagement with those people? Are those actually your people, or are they just people who are on, your social media because they're people who are trying to grow their social media as well? So,
And when you say engagement, just specifically for the listeners, that means that when they post, you probably set things up. I haven't seen your MLM. Maybe it's your personal. I couldn't tell because maybe it was so authentic that I couldn't see through it. But you ask a question, someone answers, and you answer back. Is
yeah.
that what you mean by engagement? It's basically talking to your audience, and your comment about it's a grind is really, it just takes time, right?
I shouldn't. Yeah, it isn't.
No, it is a grind. You don't have to apologize for that. And I think listeners should understand that, people ask me, like, when I built that social media site for fishing, we did it one by one. I mean, I answered everybody. I got on there. And to this day, everybody wants the magic wand. And I think it can be a grind.
Yeah.
I mean, it really can be, but it's not a grind in the very super negative way, other than sometimes you've got to do something you don't feel like doing, because ultimately it is something that you're good at and that you're having results and does help with accountability.
Well, I think it goes back to that, is it fulfilling, right? Like there again, there's so many ways that you can make money if you're willing to look outside of your box, but not all of them are going to feel awesome. Not all of them are going to be ways that are fulfilling to you to make money. So how sustainable is that revenue stream too, right? If it's something where you start a business and it's easy for you to make six figures, great. But if you hate it, how long can you actually do that for, right? It kind of goes back to that whole Tim Ferriss's, 4-hour work week, right? Like creating revenue streams for yourself that are automated and that are, process heavy, that you can delegate out to somebody else so that you can work 4 hours a week on stuff you don't necessarily like, but maybe generating income for yourself so you can spend all your other time on stuff you really enjoy doing. And for us, it's also been discovering, where those two circles meet, so how can we make money that is also fulfilling, right? Where is that intersection, and how can we acquire more revenue streams that are in that intersection, that is fulfilling and lucrative, because that for us is more sustainable.
And so you're engaging with your current people by answering them, and you're meeting incredible people along the way, probably people that you could visit in these places that you're going, at least from my experience, right? That you can do this. And do you have a rule that you say, I'm going to post once a day, twice a day, I'm going to do a story a day? Do you have any of that structure in this?
I did for a long time. And to be totally honest with you, it just started feeling more like a job and less authentic to me. So I kind of abandoned ship for that and just said, this is not, what is my purpose in doing this? If my purpose were, I want to be a millionaire in this, personal brand that I've started, then my process might be a bit different. My vision is just a little different. For me, it's sharing authentically what we're doing, living out loud, encouraging other people to do that. And if I can make money doing that, awesome. Like, let me figure out what those different ways to do that are. But I'm probably less traditional in that sense, and that I just don't, the structure and the routine and the thing that usually would feel so comfortable to me just started feeling really onerous and really like it wasn't authentic anymore. It wasn't a part of, my journey and why I was doing this. It wasn't attached to my why at all. So I haven't really been doing that, but I definitely think consistency is a big portion of growing any following. If you're not consistent about it, man, that algorithm will hit you down.
Well, and because of I'm diving just a little bit, just for another minute, into the MLM, because what I try to tell people is MLM is no different than buying something from wholesale.
Yep.
And then reselling it. Like, at the crux of it, the only difference is the MLM, tongue twister. I haven't had enough caffeine. I don't know, but they just want you to keep buying inventory. And I actually really not a big fan of that model, because I think it forces inventory on the very people that may or may not sell it, but, or you can sell it. Whereas on a wholesale model, you have a little bit more control, which you shared with uh, your box. But this engagement in that model that you have has allowed you not only to sell direct, you can correct me, it's a question, sell direct, but also gain the people under you that ultimately you're trying to get work for you that then hits you on that stair stepping process, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a yep. I mean it's funny. MLMs get such a bad rap, right? Because it is, oh, they're pyramid schemes. They just like you're living under someone else and you'll never be successful as them. And really, it's no different than a professional environment. You have a boss. That boss has a sales quota. You have a sales quota. That boss gets promoted if you do well. Like it's the exact same structure, just different business. And I'm unfortunately not very well versed in other MLMs because I've never done any of the other ones. I know for Beachbody, like we don't house any inventory, which is great. Like literally all it is I have a customer site. People go there. If they buy stuff, I get credit for it. If they don't, I don't house anything. Like there's no part of it that is, onerous in any way in terms of us, needing to be located in any direction. And at least for me, I've kind of abandoned this idea of it needs to look and sound this certain way by this certain date. So I'm probably the worst. I always joke I'm the worst MLMer ever because I don't operate my business that way, but I actually think it's what's made me more successful in the business because it's allowed me to detach from this sell. Let me push, you have to become a coach and you have to do all these things, right? Like, hey, I like the products. If you like the products, that's cool. Try them out. If you don't, return them. Like it, no skin off my back. I would rather somebody, actually reap the health and wellness benefits of, that particular, product as opposed to hate me for pushing some sort of product on them. Hopefully no one I've interacted with has felt that way, but from an engagement standpoint, it is, absolutely just that, sharing authentically with people. If I try something and I don't like it, then hey, you may like it, but that's not my jam. So try it. But like, that's not who I am. That's not what I like. That's, not my thing. But yeah, that authentic engagement, I think is something that's lost on a lot of people now. And we live in a world where there are bots engaging and liking and commenting and, doing all the things in your Instagram polls and stories and, people writing 5-paragraph novel captions on like a picture of the back of their head or, whatever. I'm sure I've done that in the past too, but it's that, what are you sharing? And is that an authentic representation of like what you're actually going through, whether that be good or bad? And also kind of dealing with then the repercussions that come from that. My family thinks I'm nuts for how much I share on social media or, me in the morning with my coffee talk and, no makeup and, right out of bed, like, hey, listen, this is what I look like in the morning. I'm not going to try to make that any more pretty for anyone. So I think it is just that we as humans are always looking for that authentic engagement. And if you can somehow connect with your users or your followers on social media that way, I think that's the best way to quote unquote sell, because you're not selling at that point in time, right? You're connecting.
And a really important point is you went over it fast and we skipped over it, but the algorithm on these platforms care. And what they really are ultimately doing is looking for the engagement because that's a trigger that's actually an important post.
Right.
So by you not buying followers or not doing this or not doing that and having actual engagement, in fact, within your audience that you do have, they are seeing your posts. The algorithm is promoting it and it's real and you're not having to trick it. And I don't want to say that that's I think you do have to hack the algorithm in the early days of any of these things to sort of get that wheel spinning.
Yep.
But eventually the goal, you've got to have authenticity and real stuff in there all along the way, because eventually it'll catch up to you. And I think, everybody's impressed when they see the person with 5 million followers or 1.3 million followers or whatever it is. And half of those followers aren't buying anything, if not more. Right. And I think this is true for the men and the women. You see guys who work out and you see women who work out, because I'm a big fitness guy and used to do bodybuilding. I sort of been my life. I mean, I grew up with Arnold Schwarzenegger as like that was it. I, even in college, I had a full body poster of him hanging in my room. Like, it was just something for me that fitness has always been like that. and oddly enough, I had a dream I was with him last night, hanging out with him, which is just
All
weird.
right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, the is they have all these followers, but they are using hashtags. And if you have a good body, and I don't think it's a bad thing, people are going to follow you because they want to look at you,
Sure.
right? So if you're a woman and you do that and you hashtag that, you're going to have a lot of guys. Whether that the guys are going to buy from you, I'm not really sure that's why they are following you. And likewise for the women, right? They're probably not following the hot guy necessarily because he's promoting some supplement. So the question, and then if you don't have that engagement, that hurts you on another algorithm because you have all these followers who aren't doing this. So I just want to mention that as a sort of in the mechanics of this, how it works.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you have the MLM, you still have that, you're still doing that. We've been going a really long time, and this is an exciting story. You're still doing the MLM? I mean, because I think we're getting towards where you are right now, to whatever New Year's Eve 2019. You're doing the MLM. You're trying. So, are you trying some other things as well?
Yeah, so the MLM is just one of those 10 to 12 revenue streams at this point in time. And they're, again, not $1 million business, not something I'm ever planning to be $1 million business. It isn't, all my eggs are not in that one basket. The last year has actually been really occupied with a totally new endeavor, which has kind of dropped in my lap in a way that I never thought it would, but has been a very natural progression with this law and then moving into kind of that retail AI space, learning about AI, and moving into cryptocurrency, educating myself about financial technology, and then kind of just my husband and working with him on a number of different things in his financial algorithmic trading kind of space. I quickly realized, like, wow, there's a lot of application with that type of technology and artificial intelligence for legal use. Lawyers are seemingly known as a bit behind the times when it comes to adoption of specifically technology. And ironically, something that I saw as a young lawyer was, hey, I'm proficient at not printing out every email. And that's like a coveted thing here. Like, why is that? I'm at trial and I can pull up a PDF really quick and other people can't. Why is that? Right. So it was easy to excel in that space and look kind of like a rock star. So I got, brought in with a good lesson in not burning your bridges when you also leave whatever it is that you're transitioning out of. But I got brought in with a partner that I used to work with in the law firm, also very tech savvy and kind of in the technology space. He had a Fortune 50 client who was interested in kind of engaging in some legal technology that was really less legal technology and more just organization of data, which I had become very familiar with my experience in our retail space. And so I said, yeah, that could be kind of interesting. And I wouldn't mind working with a big client like that. It's a little easier to get stuff done when you have a little bit more money to play with a bigger client. So we kind of started working on this project and quickly realized that there was a really big need in the legal space for not only education with legal technology, but really basic skill sets for lawyers and learning how to properly utilize the tools that they already have. And then taking that one step further with these gold mines of data that not only law firms but also big companies are sitting on in terms of the data that exists within their own companies, right? Like any lawyers out there listening will know, but a lot of law firms pay for services to search like settlement and verdict, like historical data, and they'll pay for services to give them information about jury data and judges and all sorts of things before you go to trial, when a lot of times those companies are already sitting on that information, right? If you're a Fortune 100 company and you're getting sued and your legal budget is massive, you already have all of that historical data within your law firms that you use to help litigate those cases. It's a matter of organizing that data and making it usable for you. So there's just a lot of room for interesting things in that space. And then using that as kind of a predictive model as well. How can you use that data to really then go forward and potentially reduce your legal spend or reduce your legal exposure right at the onset with that historical data that you have. So kind of a two-part company that we've established now, with a multitude of different revenue streams within it. But the consulting end of things, where we actually take on projects for companies and law firms now, and help go in and actually analyze data and combine data and figure out how to use that data for good. And then the education space. So how is it that we can actually make the legal industry better and more efficient in terms of technology, and allowing lawyers to really understand at a very elementary level what tools exist and how to utilize them, not only to make themselves more efficient and needed in the space, but also for avoiding malpractice with your clients who are expecting that you know how to turn on your computer and use PowerPoint and Excel and Word and all of those good things.
Well, that's awesome, because you really come full circle and now are making money off of the legal profession, of which well, which is a good lesson for everyone, is that just because you leave the profession doesn't mean that you can't make money off of that industry.
Absolutely.
In fact, ironically, what I found is you're worth more when you leave
Yep.
than you were. So now sounds like you're putting some edges around what effectively becomes a consulting services company, which you will ultimately build some courses or some things around training programs that they can buy from you, right? Is that sort of the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're already consulting. That is alive and well, exists, and happy to talk with anyone who wants to learn more about that. The education materials we've actually already gotten underway. So we're hoping to launch those in the next couple months. Our first course is actually all about artificial intelligence and the law. It's a kind of hot topic issue, and something that, for whatever reason, especially professionals, not just lawyers, but doctors, accountants, anyone who really holds a professional license, it seems to be a really scary subject for a lot of people, which is unfortunate, because there are so many incredible uses for it, and it is already being used in so many incredible ways in all of those industries, that I think just a really basic understanding of what it is will kind of quash some of that fear that a lot of people have. So we're already building that course, like I said, hoping to have it approved in the next couple months. And bonus for any lawyers listening out there, we're hoping to get it all CLE approved so that it can go towards your ongoing mandatory education to
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because that's really important, is that because you know the industry so well, what lawyers need to get, as would an accountant or someone else. And if you can get those things approved, then all of a sudden it becomes a different product, let's say, than just a general education. So that sounds really exciting. I mean, and you're doing this remotely, right?
All of it remotely. Yeah.
So do you, from a mechanics, do you get on the Zoom call like this, or?
Yeah, Zoom is, a great, great, great feature.
Yeah, I mean, or whatever. I don't want to.
We actually do use Zoom, so yeah, totally our tool of choice. We use a Trello board for task management, so literally everything is kind of just combined on Trello. Although someone was telling me about a great new tool where you can get everyone into a chat on some sort of app, and then from the chat you can actually create tasks from each of the different chat
Maybe
lines.
that's, I don't know who it is. I use Jira, Trello, Asana. What is it?
It's called Bitrix, I think.
Oh, Bitrix. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's, and now do you use Trello for each client, or do you use it internally to manage your business?
All of the above.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the above. Yeah. So we have like a team Trello board where we do weekly sprints. So we meet over Zoom once a week. We talk about, okay, let's look back, let's look present, let's look forward. What tasks have been done, what's blocked, who needs to do what, who's owning which tasks of, kind of general, kind of big picture items. And then for each project that we're doing, we've got a Trello board that also, summarizes from start all the way through completion. Okay, what kind of time frame are we looking at? What vendors do we need to use? Are we doing this all in-house? Are we sending this out to someone? What contracts do we need in place? What sort of capital do we need to make sure? Has the budget been sent to the client? Everything from start to finish kind of goes on those project specific then Trello boards. But,
and you have a team of contractors helping you, or you have a partner, or are the?
So I've got a partner, and then we have a whole host of contractors that we utilize depending on what the project is. Just from a time efficiency standpoint, it doesn't make sense for me to be ingesting data.
No, of course
I
not.
could pay someone, a lot less to do that.
Right.
So yeah, and then of course creating the quality assurance processes that go into place. And when you're dealing with anything legal wise, there's a big security issue that comes into place with a lot of that. So we work with a number of different vendors to make sure everything is secure, wrapped up when it comes to clients' data, and yeah, everything kind of under the sun. Sometimes that entails to a specific location to meet with those clients to, make sure that everyone is on the same board. Other times, so we're flexible in how it looks and sounds, but for the most part, it's all done from all over the world.
That's awesome. And I think the story that I recognize here is that you're in a law firm, you hate the job, you start a side hustle that is a subscription box. Turns out that the subscription box business, you realize the values in the software. And if the software can predict something around AI as a topic, you wound your way through some other things that all involve algorithms, which all of our lives are now, regardless of what you think.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a new car, you're running on an algorithm, whether that's an electric car, self-driving car, or something else. And come full circle, come back to the industry that you left, teaching them about something that you discovered because you started a side hustle.
Yep. If you had told me a year ago I would be sitting here, I would have laughed at you. Like, it was so funny. I was giving a presentation recently actually about AI and the law, and I was rehearsing in front of my husband because I'm a type A and I like to be very prepared. And, he was just kind of chuckling to himself. He was like, could you have thought 5 years ago that you would be talking about artificial intelligence, the law? And it really is. It's comical because it's such a testament to, you just never know where that path is going to take you. And your initial plan or side hustle may not be the thing, but gosh, like I would have never gotten to where I am today without, steps A through Z in between.
And I think it's everything happens for a reason. And you probably had no idea when you doing this, packing boxes in your living room and getting returns, that, this AI thing turns into it. So I think everyone needs to recognize, and you're a great story to show that sometimes we just don't know at that moment, but
Yeah.
you just gotta be open to that something will come. And I think part of that belief, whether I don't know whether you manifest that or I think you just keep going forward. At least in my life, it's just been, just keep going forward and discovering what will happen either later today or tomorrow that reveals itself. And then be aware, just I don't want to harp on this. Everyone's like, oh, be present, be present. Like, just be human.
Yeah.
Is that just be human? So what that means is just recognize some stuff when you see it in front of you, and you're not going to always recognize it, but I don't think you, like I said, you don't have to be the Zen or be present, because if you're just present all the time, you're not looking to the future. You got to look a little bit in the future, which I'm going to get to, because in the future, in May, your guys are going to have a baby.
We
So,
are.
so, if you're living the digital nomad and you're not looking towards we're going to have a baby, because that will have implications. It doesn't mean that you can't be a digital nomad without it, because I know some friends who have done it. What is your and Chris's plan, given this life event that
Yes.
will be a pivotal moment?
Yes. So we have been cognizant of listening to those who've gone before us in this experience. We like to think that we will pick up being digital nomads right after babe is born, but there again, those who are a little wiser and have had the experience of child rearing have said, maybe give yourselves a little bit of a buffer just in case you need some time to adapt to new human being involved in the mix of things. But we've decided actually that we are going to move to Arizona. We love the location. Mountains and heat are two of our favorite things, and actually one of the lowest C-section rates in the country. So that was appealing for me. But we are moving to Arizona actually probably in February. We're due in May, so hoping to kind of hunker down in February. We've decided we're not going to buy anything. We're just going to rent. We are going to try to get into at least one house so that we're not moving from Airbnb while we're, in labor and doing all sorts of crazy things. But we're going to start just with a short-term lease, see kind of how it goes. Maybe it will be an appealing thing for us to have home base thereafter, just so that we kind of have a jump point. But ideally, we'd like to continue traveling. I guess we'll just have to see kind of how that all transpires once we have another little dependent human involved in the mix.
What city?
We're gonna move to Phoenix.
Phoenix, cool. Yeah, Phoenix is a cool, and then Phoenix and Scottsdale and that whole area is really cool.
Yeah, no, we love it there. It'll be a good adventure. We've never lived there, so another new experience, making memories.
Yeah, making memories. And so the plan is you are gonna lean into, I think the name of is pollinatelegal.com, right?
Yeah, it's Pollinate Legal, Legal Technology Operations plot is the short, but pollinatelegal.com is our.
That's where they can find you.
Yeah, that's how you can find us. Yeah.
You can find if you're a lawyer out there listening or anybody in the legal profession. I shouldn't say just a lawyer because legal profession's got tons of people now working in it. You can find Whitney and her consulting business and service business at pollinatelegal.com. And there's a form on there that they.
Yep. Email, subscribe, do all the things. You can reach out to us that way, or just subscribe for general news. We're kind of just in the process of getting all of our presence online up and going. So hoping to get, our LinkedIn page up and more kind of information out there into the world about what it is that we're doing. I like to say once things settle down, but it seems things never ever settle down for purposes of making sure you have all of your things done. But we're growing. So just kind of getting up and running, and you can find us there and subscribe or reach out to us on the website.
That's awesome. And I think the last thing I'll leave people with is Whitney does not have this business all together. She didn't wait until she had the LinkedIn page, until she had I mean, you're laughing, right? But if people say to me, I can't get started because, well, I've got to have a web page. I've got to have this. I got to have that. Well, I'm not really sure that you need any of that crap. What you need is a customer that you have a problem that you're solving for someone that will pay you. And here's the good news, newsflash for everyone. What technical steps to incorporate to build a LinkedIn page are well known.
Yep.
That's not the problem.
And if not, there's Google. Like the majority of the stuff I've learned now has been on YouTube or Google.
So when you just real quick, when you got your first customer, you weren't incorporated. Is that right? Not incorporated, not even think right. Thank you. Thank you.
We did it quickly thereafter from a legal perspective, but that's only because we're lawyers.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't think it's really, because you're lawyers, you recognize it, but I think for everyone, I tell them, when you start getting customers where you're putting your personal assets at risk, it's time to put a wall up between you and those personal assets. That's really what it is. But it doesn't mean on your first customer necessarily. Maybe you get 3 or 4, because for all we know, that was a good relationship. Someone pays you because they like you and it doesn't turn into a business. Then we've incorporated, we've got this resident agent, we got all this stuff that comes along with it. So, but that's awesome. I'm really excited for you. I know that business is going to do well. I hate to say it, I know, but I'm pretty sure it's going to do well. Your timing is really good, and your knowledge of the profession. So I just want to say thank you so much for being on here and being vulnerable and really telling the story, of which it takes a lot of courage to go on and say things that you normally might not say in public, just because it's outside the box. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
We will have you back after you have a baby and give you a few months to settle and figure out if you're still in Arizona or you've moved somewhere else. So thank you so much, Whitney.
Sounds great. Thank you.